A. The human brain is not a fixed structure. It is dynamic, constantly changing based on how we interact with the world. This adaptability, known as neuroplasticity, means that the brain literally reshapes itself in response to repeated behaviors and thoughts. Every time we choose to engage in a new challenge, learn something difficult, or push ourselves outside our comfort zone, we are triggering the growth of new neural pathways. These circuits become stronger the more we use them, much like muscles under consistent resistance. On the flip side, when we avoid discomfort or retreat into ease, the brain prunes away the circuits involved in motivation, focus, and discipline. It doesn't discriminate between good and bad habits. It simply reinforces what's repeated. This biological truth explains why some people seem to grow rapidly, while others stay mentally and emotionally stagnant. Stuckness is often not a lack of capability, but a lack of neurological engagement. To level up, we must stop waiting for the perfect moment and begin feeding the brain signals that change is necessary. The brain listens to action, not intentions. Most people misunderstand their potential because they think personality and abilities are static traits. But science shows that what we repeatedly do becomes what we are, quite literally. When someone trains themselves to wake up early, resist distractions, or stick to a difficult task, their brain begins mapping those routines into their identity. The more often these actions are repeated, the more automated they become, which is the essence of behavioral mastery. It's not about overwhelming change all at once, but about small, deliberate decisions stacked daily. Repetition, especially under focus and intention, is the fuel for rewiring the mind. This is why the discomfort of a new routine or skill should be seen as a good sign. It's the brain's way of signaling it's adapting. People who feel stuck aren't broken, they've just trained the brain to avoid effort, usually unconsciously. But the moment new actions are taken, even if small, the mind starts listening and adjusting. Change begins when effort is consistently applied, not when motivation magically arrives. The greatest mistake many make is waiting to feel ready, confident, or inspired before taking action. But the brain doesn't operate that way. It needs experience before it can generate belief or emotion to support the effort. In other words, clarity and confidence come from doing, not thinking. If you wait to feel different before behaving differently, you trap yourself in an endless loop of passivity. When you take action in the face of discomfort, the brain marks that as important and starts adjusting internal chemistry and focus to make it easier next time. This is especially true in moments of resistance. When you override that voice telling you to quit, scroll, or delay, you're not just winning a small battle, you're reinforcing circuits responsible for long-term success. The more you do this, the easier it becomes, because your brain starts expecting challenge and primes itself to handle it. Eventually, things that once seemed overwhelming become normal. This is not magic, it's biology shaped by choice. Every time you step into effort, especially when it feels uncomfortable, you activate learning and growth mechanisms that are dormant when you choose ease. It's not just about building skills, it's about strengthening the machinery inside the brain that controls focus, persistence, and clarity. You're telling your nervous system that you're in charge, not your mood or habits. This repeated message reshapes your brain at a structural level. Just like muscles adapt to repeated load, your cognitive systems become more efficient when challenged consistently. When people say growth is painful, what they're really describing is the brain rewiring itself, and that process requires energy. But with each repetition, the friction decreases, and the process becomes more fluid. Eventually, the hard things become habits, and the habits build a new version of you. But that only happens when you push through the early friction and stop interpreting resistance as a sign to stop. Resistance is actually proof that change is happening at the cellular level. This is the part most people miss. Change isn't an emotional experience at first. It's a mechanical, neurological one. Waiting to feel different before acting different is backwards. The correct sequence is to act, then allow the brain to catch up emotionally. The more you do this, the faster the nervous system adapts. You'll start noticing that things you used to avoid now feel normal, even automatic. That's because your brain has built new circuits that support the new behavior. You've shifted from conscious effort to subconscious efficiency. But that transition doesn't happen overnight. It's earned through repetition, discomfort, and persistence. The people who grow the most aren't those with perfect plans. They're the ones who act despite resistance and repeat until their brain reflects the new standard. This is available to anyone willing to embrace the discomfort of deliberate action. Your biology is designed to change, but it needs consistent signals that demand it. When you choose to level up, you're not just building willpower. You're building a stronger neurological foundation for performance. This includes everything from decision-making to emotional regulation to memory. The brain becomes more efficient when it's challenged to be efficient. For me, efficiency is more of a challenge to be efficient. This is how momentum is born. You might begin with just 10 minutes of focused work or a walk instead of scrolling, but those moments matter deeply. The brain doesn't measure effort by scale. It responds to consistency. Every time you show up when it's hard, you build trust with yourself, and that trust creates the confidence people chase. True confidence isn't a feeling, it's familiarity with discomfort. It's knowing you've done hard things before and can do them again. That knowledge comes from action, not self-talk. If you want to evolve, train your mind the same way you'd train a muscle, repeatedly, intentionally, and with patience. Being stuck is not a permanent condition, it's a signal. It means your nervous system is under-challenged, not broken. Most people think they need more motivation, but what they really need is a reason to act consistently. That reason doesn't have to be dramatic, it just has to be real. A sense of responsibility, a clear goal, or even curiosity can be enough to spark action. Once action begins, the nervous system follows, releasing chemicals like dopamine to reward effort. This is how you build intrinsic motivation, not by waiting for it, but by earning it through repetition. The more often you act in alignment with your goals, the more aligned your mind becomes with those goals. And over time, the effort that once felt overwhelming becomes automatic. This is not about pushing endlessly. It's about pushing strategically and letting your biology adapt to a higher standard. You are built for this. The truth is, every time you choose growth over comfort, you're making a biological investment. You're feeding the circuits of progress and letting the ones of passivity weaken. This creates a compounding effect. Progress starts small, but it multiplies because your brain becomes more capable of handling effort, challenge, and focus. This creates momentum, and with momentum, even small actions lead to large outcomes. The gap between the person you are and the person you want to be is not filled with motivation, it's filled with repetition and intention. There's no need to fear change when you understand how the brain adapts. You're not starting from zero, you're starting with the most adaptable organ in the body, ready to reshape itself based on what you repeatedly do. That should empower you. It means your future is not fixed. It's actively being built by the choices you make today. At the end of the day, the choice to level up is a decision to take control of the systems that govern who you are. You're not at the mercy of old habits or past versions of yourself, unless you choose to be. The brain doesn't hold grudges, it follows orders, and those orders are given through action, not thoughts or feelings alone. If you repeat what challenges you, you will become someone stronger. If you avoid what challenges you, you will become someone smaller. The beauty of neuroplasticity is that it responds every single day, meaning you can redirect your path at any moment. The key is not to wait for ideal circumstances, but to act in defiance of your limitations. When you understand that your biology is designed to support change, you no longer fear discomfort. You welcome it. That is the mindset that separates the stuck from the unstoppable. The choice is truly yours. As she sat watching the world go by, something caught her eye. It wasn't so much its color or shape, but the way it was moving. She squinted to see if she could better understand what it was and where it was going, but it didn't help. As she continued to stare into the distance, She didn't understand why this uneasiness was building inside her body. Most people view stress as the enemy, something to be avoided at all costs. But what they fail to understand is that stress in controlled and intentional amounts is actually one of the most powerful tools for personal growth. It activates the body's internal systems in ways that promote resilience, learning, and transformation. When you voluntarily expose yourself to a challenging environment, be it physical, mental, or emotional, you trigger a biological response that strengthens your nervous system. This is not a punishment, it's a signal for the body and brain to adapt and become stronger. Growth never comes from comfort because comfort doesn't demand change. Only stress creates the tension necessary for evolution. But not all stress is created equal. Chronic, uncontrolled stress breaks us down, while short bursts of focused stress build us up. The key is to choose the right kind of pressure and apply it with purpose. This process is known as hormesis, the idea that a small, manageable dose of stress leads to positive adaptation. Think of lifting weights. The resistance damages the muscle just enough to signal repair and growth. The same principle applies to the brain and nervous system. When you force yourself to work deeply, confront fears, or push through hesitation, you create a controlled disturbance that leads to a stronger, more capable mind. These micro-stressors train your brain to stay calm under fire, to solve problems under pressure, and to adapt to uncertainty with clarity. It's no coincidence that people who consistently face challenges become mentally tougher over time. They're not born that way. They earn it through exposure and recovery. You don't grow by avoiding friction. You grow by managing it and stepping through it. The problem isn't that life is too stressful. It's often that people haven't trained themselves to handle it. Controlled stress activates powerful neurochemicals that boost performance and focus. When you're placed in a situation that requires effort, your body releases adrenaline and other compounds that sharpen your senses, increase alertness, and push energy toward the task at hand. If used intentionally, these chemical shifts give you access to a higher state of focus and engagement. That's why people often report moments of clarity during high-stakes situations. However, without the habit of facing challenge, this same stress can become overwhelming. The difference isn't in the intensity, it's in the preparation. When you train your mind and body to encounter stress on your own terms, you increase your tolerance and emotional range. That means you become harder to shake, more grounded in chaos, and more capable in any domain. Building this kind of stress capacity is a skill. And like all skills, it requires deliberate practice. People often talk about leveling up, but very few understand that discomfort is the currency for that transformation. You can't grow into a new version of yourself by staying within the emotional and mental limits of the old one. You have to apply strategic pressure to expand what you can handle. This might mean waking up earlier, speaking up when you're afraid, or staying focused when distractions tempt you. Each of these actions introduces a bit of stress, but within that stress lies the exact signal your brain needs to change. You're not just doing hard things for the sake of it. You're showing your system that you are capable of more. With repetition, your tolerance increases, and what was once difficult becomes standard. This is how you stretch the edges of your potential. Not by talking about change, but by stepping into pressure. Again and again, until your nervous system adapts to that new baseline. There is a false belief that you should wait for motivation before doing difficult things. But motivation is unreliable, especially when you're pushing into new territory. It's far more effective to build momentum through what's called stress inoculation, the process of gradually introducing yourself to higher levels of pressure so that you become familiar with it. You don't start by overwhelming yourself, but by pushing just slightly past your current limits and holding there. Over time, your system begins to normalize that level of stress and prepares for more. This is how elite performers train, and it's how anyone can train their brain and body to become more resilient. Waiting for the perfect time or the perfect feeling is a delay tactic. Real change begins when you take action before you feel ready and allow your nervous system to catch up. You're not meant to be perfect, you're meant to be in motion. There's a sharp difference between passive stress that drains you and intentional stress that builds you. Passive stress is what happens when you feel overwhelmed by things you didn't choose. Traffic, toxic environments, unresolved fears. Intentional stress, however, is what you apply voluntarily to train yourself. It's choosing the workout, choosing the hard conversation, choosing the difficult goal. When you take control of your stress exposure, you gain control of your emotional reactivity. You learn to respond instead of react, to face instead of flee. This changes everything, from your self-perception to your actual neurochemistry. The more you expose yourself to chosen difficulty, the more confident and calm you become. Confidence isn't a gift, it's a reflection of how much stress you've overcome by choice. When you repeatedly walk into fire and come out stronger, you start believing in your ability to handle life. Not because someone told you, but because you proved it to yourself. Your body and mind are built for challenge. They crave progress even when you think they crave rest. What we often interpret as fatigue or boredom is actually a lack of meaningful stress. When you remove challenge from your life, your biology downshifts into survival mode. Low energy, low motivation, low focus. But when you reintroduce effort, purpose, and pressure, everything lights back up. Hormones and neurotransmitters come online. Tension sharpens, purpose deepens. This isn't a motivational theory, it's a physiological fact. You were designed to grow through strain, and when you lean into that strain deliberately, your system rewards you. You start to feel alive again, not because life became easier, but because you became stronger. That's the paradox of pressure. It drains those who avoid it and energizes those who embrace it. Every time you choose to challenge yourself, you're not just building external results, you're sculpting your internal environment. You're reshaping the way your nervous system interprets fear, uncertainty, and resistance. What used to paralyze you begins to excite you. What used to trigger anxiety becomes an opportunity to practice calm. This mental and emotional transformation is what separates those who evolve from those who remain stuck. It has less to do with talent or intelligence and more to do with willingness. Willingness to step into discomfort, willingness to fail and recover, willingness to face your limits and push slightly past them. Each time you do that, your internal systems take note. They upgrade. They reinforce your identity as someone who can adapt. That's not ego, it's earned self-respect. The more often you train under pressure, the more capable you become in everyday life. Small stressors like distractions, criticism, or obstacles no longer shake you because you've built a deeper foundation. It's like training in high altitude. Once you return to normal conditions, everything feels easier. This mental altitude training applies across all areas of life. When you practice discipline under stress, you improve your focus. When you stay calm in adversity, you regulate your emotions. These are not personality traits. They are neurological outcomes of repeated, intentional stress exposure. The path forward is not to avoid pressure, but to engage with it wisely. Use it as a teacher, not a threat. Let it shape you into someone capable of more, not afraid of more. The choice to level up begins when you stop fearing challenge and start using it as fuel. Stress is a signal. It tells you where growth lives. If something scares you, drains you, or overwhelms you, that's a call to examine, engage, and overcome, not to run away. You were never meant to be fragile. You were meant to adapt, to grow, to respond with strength. But that can only happen if you stop protecting yourself from every difficulty and begin leaning into the ones that build you. Controlled, deliberate stress doesn't break you, it breaks the limits you've placed on yourself. That's the truth most people miss. Leveling up doesn't require a breakthrough moment. It requires a consistent pattern of choosing growth over ease, challenge over comfort, effort over avoidance. If you do that daily, even in small ways, you'll find that the stress you once feared becomes the very force that shapes your strength. As she sat watching the world go by, something caught her eye. It wasn't so much its color or shape, but the way it was moving. She squinted to see if she could better understand what it was and where it was going, but it didn't help. As she continued to stare into the distance, she didn't understand why this uneasiness was building inside her body. One of the most powerful aspects of this process is that it builds self-trust. When you make promises to yourself and actually follow through, you create a neurological loop of reward. Your brain releases dopamine not just from completing tasks, but from the anticipation of effort followed by achievement. Over time, this loop trains you to associate hard work with satisfaction. You begin to crave the structure and certainty that discipline provides. This is where lasting transformation starts. Not with some grand gesture, but with the quiet confidence that you'll do what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it. Self-trust isn't built by saying affirmations in the mirror. It's built by showing up. And the more you show up, the more you solidify that identity. Eventually, your behavior becomes your proof, and you stop needing external validation. Consistency shapes character, and repetition forges identity. Each day that you act in alignment with your values, you give your nervous system something to anchor to. It starts to expect a certain level of performance from you. This is how habits become automatic. They are formed not through force, but through familiarity. When you eat healthy, train your body, focus deeply, or control your emotions, you're laying bricks in the foundation of a stronger self. The repetition of these behaviors creates myelination around the neurons responsible for those actions, which makes them easier and faster to perform. You're not just building willpower, you're building efficiency. The more you repeat, the less friction you face, and that reduced friction becomes momentum. You no longer have to push yourself with as much force because the behavior begins to pull you forward naturally. Your brain doesn't care about your goals unless your actions prove they matter. Thoughts, dreams, and intentions are passive. They only activate the nervous system when they are paired with consistent behavior. If you want to become more focused, you have to train focus daily. If you want to become more disciplined, you have to choose discipline every time you're tempted by distraction. These small battles are not insignificant. They are the training ground of transformation. With each repetition, your sense of identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who executes. That subtle shift in identity is what builds internal power. It's what makes future decisions easier because your actions are no longer up for debate. They're aligned with who you've become. The biggest lie we tell ourselves is that we need motivation to act. Motivation is unreliable, emotional, and often absent when you need it most. What truly drives long-term change is the system you build, the daily routines, the rituals, the non-negotiables. These systems train your brain to operate under structure, not impulse. They free up mental energy because you don't have to think about what to do next. You've already decided. This predictability makes you more focused and reduces decision fatigue. The brain thrives on order, and when you give it a framework to operate within, it optimizes itself. Discipline removes uncertainty and replaces it with control. And within that control, you find something most people lack: freedom. The freedom to build your life rather than react to it. Discipline is not about doing what you hate forever. It's about doing what's necessary until it becomes what you enjoy. Every time you override the desire to quit, your brain becomes better at doing hard things. You become more adaptable, more resilient, and more capable of handling pressure. These aren't abstract traits. They're the result of strengthening the brain's executive function over time. As this area becomes more active, your ability to make long-term decisions improves. You stop needing to negotiate with yourself. You stop needing to be convinced, you start executing because that's who you are now. The identity of someone who follows through isn't given to you. It's built by the actions you repeat when no one is watching. It's built in silence, in solitude, in resistance. No matter where you are starting from, the path forward is always the same. Repetition with intention, repeating an action mindlessly, will only strengthen what you don't want, but repeating an action with awareness and purpose carves new grooves in the brain that align with your goals. This process takes time, but it doesn't have to be perfect. What matters most is consistency. A missed day doesn't erase progress, but quitting does. The brain doesn't demand perfection. It demands clarity. It asks, "What are we doing today?" and listens to what you do, not what you say. So if you show up with purpose again and again, your brain will follow. And in time, your behaviors become your identity. You won't have to fake confidence. It will be a byproduct of alignment. There's a quiet power that comes from knowing you've shaped yourself. When you realize that your habits, your mindset, and your results are all under your influence, you stop blaming circumstances. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you. You begin to understand that the life you're living is the outcome of the standards you've trained your brain to follow. If those standards are high, your results will reflect it. If those standards are inconsistent, your results will be chaotic. That's why discipline isn't punishment. It's a commitment to yourself. A commitment to not settle, to not escape through distraction, and to not betray your own potential. It's in this commitment that real self-respect is born. And with self-respect comes focus, strength, and direction. The truth is, your identity is never static. It's being shaped in real time by every choice you make. You are always becoming something. The question is, are you becoming stronger or weaker? Are you becoming more aligned with your vision or drifting away from it? These answers lie in your actions, not your words. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. You just have to be willing to show up and do the work, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. That's when identity change takes root, not in easy moments, but in moments of resistance, in choosing progress over comfort, in choosing to be who you said you'd be. Each time you win that internal battle, even if it's small, you are carving a path forward. The more you walk that path, the clearer it becomes. The brain adapts to what is familiar. So make discipline familiar. Make action familiar. Make resilience your default. These traits are not found, they are forged. Forged through effort, repetition, and a refusal to be defined by old stories. The past may explain you, but it does not define you. What defines you is what you do next. The story of your identity is written in action, and you hold the pen. In the end, the difference between staying stuck and leveling up is not luck, timing, or even talent. It's repetition. It's the decision to show up day after day and do the work that aligns with the person you want to become. And when you do that, something incredible happens. You stop trying to change your life. You realize you already have. As she sat watching the world go by, something caught her eye. It wasn't so much its color or shape, but the way it was moving. She squinted to see if she could better understand what it was and where it was going, but it didn't help. As she continued to stare into the distance, she didn't understand why this uneasiness was building inside her body.